I've already taken a stab at the music in the Mortal Kombat and Home Alone movies from last year. Might as well take a look at The Matrix Resurrections too. Don Davis is no longer at the helm, so how is the music in The Matrix 4 going to hold up compared to the original trilogy? Let's take a listen and see how well the music was reloaded, revolutionized, or perhaps resurrected. With Don Davis not scoring The Matrix 4, who do we have? Tom Tykwer and Johnny Klimek, both film directors and composers that have collaborated with the Wachowskis before on movies like Cloud Atlas. Under the name of Pale 3, they also worked on The Matrix music before, like in this scene. So they are familiar with Don Davis's work on the previous movies and should understand the meaning behind the music. So hopefully this means we will have a unified score. Unlike other film scores by composers like John Williams, we aren't able to just follow themes throughout the movies. Instead, we need to look at music concepts and their meaning. There's a lot more to that soundtrack than what I'll be talking about here, so stay tuned for a future video where I'll break down that soundtrack and show how deep the rabbit hole goes. Anyway, instead of having a theme for humanity, Don Davis used diatonic scales, primarily the Aeolian scale, which is just your natural minor. The machines had chromaticism. For chaos, we got aleatory or chance music, and we of course got a 12-tone matrix for confusion. Again, this only scratches the surface of what is in that soundtrack, ignoring things like mirroring, the number 7, and polyrhythms. The general vibe of much of the soundtrack from The Matrix Resurrections does one of 4 things. It creates its own sound, uses a similar identity to Don Davis' score, plays on tropes of film musics from the last decade, or it directly references the original score. So let's tackle these ideas one by one. Part 1. Creating its own sound. Ideally, I would personally want a score that follows along with the identity of the original trilogy. I don't mind that this movie has its own identity in a way. It could be another trilogy with its own ideas and concepts that are only related by a general story. Think of the Star Trek series. They are all tied together in the same universe, but all have their own identities, even if they reference something from another series. Some great examples of this film having its own identity are from these scenes. We have music that is unrelated to anything other than this film and serves its purpose in this film alone. In the scene where Bugs and Morpheus meet, we have this melody that repeats throughout the movie. It's a standalone melody belonging only to this movie, but it has a characteristic that is important. The melody shifts from minor to major and back again. This plays on the mirror aspect that a major chord is the mirror of a minor chord. While this follows the same trend as the original score by Don Davis in a small way, it still creates its own identity in this film.
Unlock my mind.
I'm sorry, it's a nice view. What happened to Bugs and the others? They're supposed to be sterilizing the lunacy, but the truth...
Trying to explain a mission as crazy as this one. What are you doing?
When Neo and Trinity are meeting in the coffee shop, we get this piano line. I currently have not found a connection to the rest of the film with this music, but it does occur multiple times, combining a feeling of relaxation, but the intervals are not always diatonic and create a small feeling of unease as well, as if everything seems to be going well, but something isn't right.
Have we met?
When entering I.O., since this doesn't have any direct reference to the original movie, the music doesn't either, and I think that's great. Even the fight music in the factory has its own identity and doesn't reference the chromaticism and diatonicism from the first movie. Part 2. Similar identity to Don Davis's score. While there is more meaning behind some of the ostinato lines from the original movie, these cues use music that contain a similar underscore. They provide the atmosphere to the universe that we are in, and I personally do not have a problem with these and feel that they give us the vibe we are looking for that makes us think and feel The Matrix. In this scene, we have an interesting chord buildup that seems to be a reference to what has been called chord pyramids from the first movie, but it sounds off to me. We aren't hearing the sound of this pyramid cluster that we would expect. The notes are too spaced out, intervallically speaking, and do not have a diatonic or chromatic quality that we've come to expect after the first trilogy. Compare it to these two chord pyramids that happen in the Burly Brawl in Matrix Reloaded. Later in this scene, Neo sees Deja Vu, the cat, and we hear what sounds like a 12-tone matrix, meaning all 12 notes of the chromatic scale are played in a predetermined order and must be completed before a new row can be introduced. I won't go into detail here, but just know that the sound created here matches that from the first movie. The notes are moving way too fast for me to transcribe to verify if it is, but at the very least, that has to be the effect that they are going for. In the original movie, the 12-tone matrix was used in key scenes early in the movie to represent confusion. In this movie, they are using it as a theme for the cat, Deja Vu. It appears later in the film during the cue Bullet Time as well, and you could argue that these scenes are of confusion.
I hate lying.
When escaping with Neo, the music is similar to that of the choir we hear in the first movie, representing voices of humanity. The dojo scene is pretty obvious on its visual reference, and the music follows suit. While it's not the same drum tracks used, it follows the same style. Nothing wrong with it since this scene plays out differently than the first movie. And per the story, this is an intentional reference, so of course the music would be too. Part 3. Tropes of recent films. I'm not a fan of movies using the same ideas from other films. After we got that from Inception, everyone just had to use it. The orchestration and sound from Remote Control Productions composers, namely Hans Zimmer, has plastered itself all over film music over the last decade. And while neither composer here is associated with them, as far as I know, they still adopted some music from them.
No. Whoa. What do you mean, no? You wanted this, you did this. This was your idea.
It was a test.
The track Time from Inception was big for audiences. For me, it doesn't do a whole lot, just repeating chords over and over, slowly building. While it's effective for a certain purpose, it's somewhat boring to analyze. And wouldn't you know it, several spots in this movie, they did the same thing and just repeated a chord loop and slowly built.
What's happening?
Neo, what's wrong?
Personally, I'm not a fan of this, and the trend of filmmakers that see something audiences like and want to capitalize on it, especially when it creates a quick and cheap score, it devalues the power of music, in my opinion. Part 4. Direct references. This film has flashbacks to the original trilogy, so naturally it's going to have musical references too. Since Don Davis used music ideas rather than themes in the original movie, we have to actually look at the scenes this music comes from to see if its original context makes any sense in this new movie. The opening chords are the same from the original Matrix movie. The second and third movies actually started up a half step and a whole step from the original. While I'm not sure if there was some actual meaning behind it, and honestly there probably is, having the fourth film back in the original key could really signify a reboot over a continuation. The opening scene doesn't have the same overall music that I would have expected either. They opted instead to just go with the same vibe.
You know, did you hear what? Are you sure this line is clean? Yeah, of course I'm sure. Looks like old code.
It feels really familiar.
Drop a pin. I'll signal for backup.
I'm gonna check it out.
Bugs, if the general finds out we've been fishing.
A quick peek on her.
When this modal trinity is on the move, we hear music that sounds like it could be the same vibe from the original music, but I think it's actually a variation on this material instead that started in the first movie but appeared in the third as well.
I've been looking for you. I don't know if you're ready to see what I'm going to show you, but unfortunately...
This comes back later in The Matrix 4 with a lot more oomph. I wasn't sure if this belonged in the style of Davis or here, but when Morpheus captures Bugs Bunny,
What's up, Doc?
it sounds like we have music that is similar to the end of the tracker scene in the first movie. I think it does work here, as it was a sudden transition into this room in both movies after a quote, "what's happening" kind of scene. When Smith is rapid punching Neo in the factory fight, we have music from the original movie. It's a direct copy of this scene. Oh wait, that would have been too perfect. Instead, they used music from this scene at the beginning when Trinity is running away from agents. Yeah, that makes more sense, right? Continuing on the train of weird music references, we get a callback to when Neo sees the pod towers for the first time in the first movie. The vocals commercials here, that were a last-minute ad, are there to represent the humans. It's their voices. I'm not sure how that representation works here. You can't call back to it and just think slapping in those ideas are going to work. They have to be carefully placed. Again, stay tuned for my full analysis of the first Matrix movie. Part 5. One key moment. I do need to give them some credit though, and this is why I know they're aware of Davis's work. In this scene when Morpheus is talking about his programming and what he is supposed to do and kill bugs, we get the perfect use of chromaticism and diatonicism. When Morpheus says he knows what he is, the music shifts to a half-step interval, something chromatic. But when he says "and yet," the interval changes to a whole step or a diatonic sound, which matches the use of those in the original movie that I mentioned at the beginning of this video.
Do you understand that you are digital sentience?
I know what I am. Just like I know my job is to hunt down and destroy sentience. And yet,
The Matrix Resurrections has a mixed bag of music. Some elements worked, others didn't. It really shows that the same care and preparation that was put into the first film was not done here, and in some ways adds to the degradation of film music over the last handful of years. Not everything was bad, but it is easily shown that they wanted to play on the nostalgia of the first film and didn't put much thought into its use here. Whether this is a Lana Wachowski issue or Tom Tykwer and Johnny Klimek issue, I don't know, but what I do know is that better care needs to be taken when reusing music. The YouTube channel Matrix Explained uploaded a video, and one line stuck out to me that works for the music here as well.
Franchises that in their time were revolutionary. They changed the film industry so that years later, that same industry takes their innovations and turns them into an easy to digest format that is reused in everything. Possibly for the Wachowskis, the fact that after The Matrix came out and so many films began to imitate their style of cinematography, special effects, and story structure, became an example of how the system took their achievements and assimilated them and turned them into something trivial, forgetting what made them important in the first place. The system took their achievements and assimilated them and turned them into something trivial, forgetting what made them important in the first place.
But those are my thoughts on the music of The Matrix Resurrections. What are your thoughts on the movie and its soundtrack? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time.